All right, guys, welcome back. My name is Scott Webb. I am with C2C Sports Investments. You can follow me on Twitter at C2C Scott Webb. And this is one of our team previews, and we're going to start here with the Houston Astros. They won the World Series last year, so what a better way to start the 2018 breakdowns with them. So Houston, they won 101 games last year. They lost 61. Um, and we kind of figure out how they got there and why they won and where they went. And obviously, they were the World Series champs. But I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at some of these statements that we make here. Number one, the Houston Astros of last season, their batting rank in terms of WAR was 33.0. Their pitching was 20.8 for a total of 53.8. Those numbers are important when you start to then compare them to what the projections look like for this year. So we'll do that in just a minute, but we want to talk about this team a little bit because in review of what the team did and then look at what they're going to do as we move forward. The reason that they're the best team in baseball last year is because they have the best baseball offense, and the reality is it's not even close. I mean, you can say what you want about the Yankees or the Indians or the Dodgers or anybody else, but the sabermetric numbers and how you analyze this analysis, it's just not even close. So if you look at runs differential, they ranked third. They had 196 runs to the good. There were two teams ahead of them, the Cleveland Indians and the Yankees. The Yankees were 198. They were 196. But where the separation comes in is in a term called OFF or offense, and really what it means is it's offensive runs above average. So average is 0. And when you start to then break it down, for every 9 or 10 points you get in terms of offense number, that equivalates to 1 win. So they were 161.8, so we'll just round it off to 162. That means their offense generated 16 more wins than the average offense. So how does that stack up? Well, number 2 was the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees number was 72.8, so if you round that off, that's 7.3. We'll even make it 8 just to make a round number. So if you can kind of look at that, the differential between first place and second place is 8 wins of offense. And if you really want to stretch it out, it might even be 9. When you start to think about how they did it and what they did, it's just not even comparison. So the average team is at 0, and 0 for last year was the St. Louis Cardinals. They were 0.6. They were the 9th best team at offensive runs above average. So that only tells you there's 9 teams that are even average or above. So when you start to think about where the missing dynamic when you're doing your handicapping is, it is in offense. I know that everybody likes to look at the starting pitchers and you do your evaluations on the hitters and how they hit the pitchers and what kind of pitching streaks they're on and all that stuff. But when you have one team that is so far advanced in offense, it's one of those situations where you just can't miss those things and you can't track it that way. You have to look at it from a standpoint of that's a big edge that you can't miss out on. So to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like from the 15th team, which the 15th team would be the middle of the road. There's 30 teams in baseball. They were minus 34.3 on the runs above average. So that means they're minus 3.5 games a year, and they're the best team at 16. So that's that's 19. So you're getting to a point where it's almost 20 games just between the middle of the road that they're better than just on offense. We haven't talked about pitching yet. So if you look at them compared to the worst team was the Giants. The Giants were minus 133.5, so they're down 13 games, and they're up 16 games. So the Astros are almost 30 games better than the worst offense in baseball in terms of wins. So that's a huge, significant number in terms of how they got to where they did. Some of the other things that make this important is that, and you'll see kind of how it breaks down. They were number one in runs scored, which obviously, if they've got runs above average at number one, they're going to be a high run scoring team, and they were the first. But they're also number one in batting average, and they're number one in weighted on base percentage. So weighted on base percentage is your on base percentage, but it's also done against the opponent's strength of schedules and also based on ballparks. So it takes into effect, say, Colorado and Arizona, who play in those spacious ballparks, that they can maximize opportunities, and kind of brings them back to where they should be in terms of opportunity. So they're number one on batting average. They're number one on weighted on base average. So that means they're getting on base, but they're getting on base through hits, because they were ranked 21st in getting walks. But one of the things that I thought was really important in this particular breakdown for this team is that, well, one of the things that they used to do when they were younger and not had a little bit of veteran help there is they struck out all the time. Well, in 2017, they were ranked 30th in strikeouts, which means they were the hardest team to strike out. So they're getting on base, they're hitting the ball, they're making lots of good contact. And then lastly, how do they do in the power arena? Well, there's two ways to look at this. I always break it down in twofold. One is home runs, and they were second in the league in home runs. And then two is a term called ISO. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the next 30 times with all the different previews that we'll be doing. But the ISO is important because it takes into effect total bases. So total bases also includes doubles and triples. So when you're looking at it from a perspective of gap to gap type hits, doubles, and trying to maximize, I wouldn't necessarily call it power, but at the same time, it's extra base hits. It's not like you slap hitting and doing different things. So that does have a relevancy to power. I would tell you that this team's number one in that rank as well. So when you start to think about how do they get to the best offense, well, they got to the best offense because they're the best hitting team. They got the best average. They got on base at the most. They scored the most runs, so they maximized their opportunities. You're going to hear me in some of the other ones talk about a new term called productive outs. In productive outs, this team was fourth. So not only when they got guys on base, they moved them over is what it means. They put them in scoring position, and then because their ISO is number one, they were able to drive them in. They didn't need it with, they got a double, knocked them in a run, or whatever it took to get that run in. They made that happen. So as you start to think about the Houston Astros, they were number one on offense last season, and they're a bunch of young players. They're all coming back this year. Yes, they had some players that had super years, like Altuve with the MVP, and he had a really high WAR, 7.5. Correa played, and he did really well. His was over 5. So when you start to think about the individual components and where they stack up and how they portray themselves, it's one of those situations where you can't see them really falling back much. I can see Altuve, from his 7.5 dropping down a little bit, because he's not necessarily going to be in a position where he's in that spot to continually put himself in a position where he's up for the MVP. His projection is 4.8 WAR, so it's a little bit of a drop. But anything above 4 is all-star caliber, so that's a very high number for him. And if you just go down the line with these players, Altuve 4.8. Carlos Correa, 6.1. If you're getting into the 6s or into the 7s in terms of projections, those are people that are going to be in for the MVP. Alex Bregman is 3.8. So now you're talking another all-star type year. So they've got 3 of them already. And then you get into the outfield with George Springer, 3.9. Josh Reddick is 2.4. So if he's one of your worst guys at 2.4, that's not bad. Plus, he's a veteran hitter, and he's really good at what he does and providing some defense, too. So Brian McCann behind the plate, 2.3, and Uleski Gurriel, 1.8. Now you got to remember Gurriel has got he's got a hand issue right now, so they sent him back to Houston to see what's going on with it. He's going to miss the first 5 games anyway because of suspension. So this team is set up, ready to go. Last year their bat was 333 or 33.0. We talked about 2018 it's 29.9. So they do expect it to fall off just a little bit, but at the same time that it falls off a little bit, I mean they've got such a large lead over everybody else. It's not even close. So secondly, the last year, you can talk about the pitching. It was at 20.8, and I like to break this down into both starters and relievers. And last year they had a really good starting staff. But there's nobody better going forward in 2018 than the Houston Astros in pitching. So they project as the best hitting team in 2018 with that 29.9 WAR there. But their pitching WAR projection is 22.3. Nobody else is higher than that, but how can you think of that not being that way? Verlander, Keuchel, now Garrett Cole, and you have McCullers, who's normally probably a 2 or a 3 on a lot of teams. He's going to pitch 4th. And then Morton, Charlie Morton, who's going to be a 2, well, not a 2, but he could be a 3 on most teams. He's going to be your number 5 guy. So that staff is by and far ahead of anybody else. And then the other issue, too, to try to think about, their relief pitching is number 2. So when you start to think about who the relief pitchers are and what they're looking like, Ken Giles, they got Hector Rondon, they've got Will Harris, Chris Davinsky, Joe Smith, Brad Peacock's going to be in the bullpen more. Colin McHugh's going to be their spot starter. So there's not a whole lot of things here where the Houston Astros aren't going to be the team that it runs through. Everybody talks about the New York Yankees and the big splash that they made, and I agree the Yankees are going to be a competitor. But I still think that right now, as you go forward, everything runs through Houston. So when I started looking at it, and for my book and magazine, whatever you want to call it, as a projection, this is how I came up with some numbers. So last year they won 101 games. And when you look at a sabermetric reports of the standings, they break things down through Pythagorean theory and a couple other different effects that tell you how many games they should have won versus how many games they did win. And last year, they actually lost 2 games that they shouldn't have. So really, based on statistical numbers, they should have been at 103 wins. So then when you look at the other part of it, which is the runs differential to try to solidify whether that's a fair number or not, they were plus 196. So the Los Angeles Dodgers were plus 109, and they had 104 wins. So that matches right up to that 103, plus they had 100 more runs than they did. The Yankees had 198 runs with only 91 wins, but the Yankees were the most unlucky team last year. They should have won 107 based on sabermetric numbers. So now you're getting to a point where that 103 wins is pretty much validated by the run differential. So then you look at the projections, and this year's projections come out, and when I first looked at them, they were 98 to 99 wins. Now they're up to 101 wins on the projections. So when you look at the projections at 101 wins, these guys last year should have been at 103 wins. The team is actually better this year than last year, especially on the pitching side. So I expect this team to get to a point where I listed them at 99 wins, but I think that you very easily could see this team pushing over, getting to that 103, 104, 105 wins, and then solidifying where they're at. The difference this year, though, is the Angels are a little bit better. The Oakland A's are going to be a little bit better. I think you're going to see a little bit of a drop-off in the Texas Rangers, even though that they can hit. The reality here, though, is that Houston and Texas are rivals, so it's hard to say that Houston's going to dominate them, even though they're a weaker team. And Seattle's got some talent there, too. So it's a tougher division, so they've got to play each team in their division 19 times. So that's 57 or so games in that ball, 56 games with all those teams. So the reality becomes is now they got to go out and figure out how do they get another 50 try to get that set up so that they can win to get over that 100 number. I don't think it's going to be an easy feat for them because everybody's going to give them their best shot too. But this is the best team in baseball by far. And I know that everybody has got their hopes high for all their teams, and everybody's wanting them to do well. And then you've got all the hype around certain teams. But the Houston Astros are the team to beat, and there's not even a question about it. All right, guys, there's the Houston Astros. Talk to you later.